In the previous video, we've looked at how we can hide rows and hide columns to just move information from view. The information is not deleted, it is simply out of sight. What we're going to look at this video is how to use the group function, or the outline function as it's called in Excel, to effectively look at a different way of hiding up information. So to start with, I am just going to go ahead and select a column. Let's say I want to hide or move columns, let's say columns D and E. I want to hide them both. Instead of using the hide functions by right-clicking, in this situation I'm going to move to the Data tab, and I'm going to use the group function. I'm not going to use the drop-down menu, I'm just going to use the standard group function, and let's see what happens with that. So to start with, the columns haven't been automatically hidden, but we have this bar across the top with a little minus sign. And effectively what that's going to allow me to do when I click on the minus is contract that information and hide those columns. Now, much like when we hide columns in the conventional sense, I have column numbers missing. I've missed E and D, but also I have the two little double dividing lines between the two columns. But different from hiding columns, I have this little plus sign which very visibly tells me that there is information hidden. I also have this 1 and this 2, and we'll look at that in more detail. But effectively, if I use 1, my information is hidden. If I use 2, the information is expanded. Now, the use of this 1 and 2 is a little bit more complicated than that, but let's just leave it as level 1 is all information contracted. Level 2 is first level of information expanded. Okay, let's try something else. First of all, I'm going to remove the grouping, and I can simply move to the ungroup, and that outline or grouping is now removed from the sheet. So next up, let's look at grouping up a very large amount of data. This time I'm going to group up the whole table. And you can see I have my negative sign here, my minus sign, which I can use to hide all data from view. But within this outline or within this grouping, there may be data that I want to hide within the hidden data. So let's say these columns specifically I definitely want to group up or have them hidden. And I want them to be hidden within the original level of grouping. Again, I'll click group and we will see what happens. Now you see I have the top level group which spans all of my columns, and then I have a second level of grouping which is within my first level and only applies to columns C and D rather than the entire range. Now we'll be able to see how this 1, 2, 3 actually comes into play. If I start with 1, I will contract all the information. All information is hidden. If I use button 2, my first level expands, but not my second level. And if I use the 3 button, then all levels of grouping are now completely expanded. If I scroll back, I'll be able to see all of my information is visible. All of these same commands are also available for rows. So I could take all of this data, for example, use the group command, and again, I can press the number 1 or I can use the minus sign. Either one will contract up my data. In this situation, I simply have column headers and the total value for those fields, which may be particularly useful. And then if myself or a third party who I am distributing this information to wants to see more detail, they know there is more detail by the fact there is a plus sign, and they can see that detail by pressing the plus and seeing the data that is expanded. Grouping has certain benefits and advantages over hiding information, but also if we add too many levels of grouping, it can be a little confusing and cumbersome. But it's simply good to know that we have an alternative to hiding which is a bit more dynamic and doesn't require our end user to have quite the same level of Excel. That concludes our video on grouping.